Hello, John Terrell here. Welcome to Chateau Cube, where we talk about life, limited magic, and cube draft. It has been a busy time, you all. I am recently back from CubeCon, our very first CubeCon. It finally happened. It was in Madison, Wisconsin, October 20th through 23rd, 2022. What a time. Oh my goodness. We had almost 200 people attend our 4-day celebration of Cube. The main event had 26 cubes, and there were so many other cubes that people brought for free play. We had awesome coverage that was streamed. I organized a roundtable discussion about math and cube design with friends from the Lucky Paper blog and podcast. Anyway, just an outstanding time, and I can't wait to run it back again next year. Also, I recently had a second cube featured on MTGO. That was the Cartographia cube. Wow, that was an amazing experience as well. WotC contracted me to develop a brand new cube for the platform, and I had a ball putting that together. It's a land-focused cube. It also has Enchantress and all sorts of artifact shenanigans you can get up to. I think people had a lot of fun with it, and I'm very much hoping that I will be able to get data from WotC once again and be able to make some observations about how people interacted with the cube. So, what with one thing and the other, I am woefully behind in studying the new set releases. So here to help us catch up with the latest Dominaria release, I have my friend Stephen Konefal, who's been a guest on Chateau Cube before, and who's an awesome person, an awesome cube designer, and whose excitement about magic and its worlds is infectious. So without further ado, here's the conversation with Stephen Konefal.
I got some dice lying around. Let me.
Oh, heck yeah.
All right.
Do you want to roll? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
How about I'll roll for color, where 1 through 5 is Wooburg, 6 is Colorless, and then you roll for mana value.
Awesome. That sounds good.
All right. So I have got a 2, so that would be blue.
And okay, I rolled a 6. Blue 6. This is kind of a tough spot, I think, because do you even want to cast stuff that costs 6 in blue? I don't know.
I've got an idea for a 6-drop blue spell. But I'm blanking on the name. You have to help me out. It is I want to say it's a something Epiphany from M21. It's the counter spell with Sublime Epiphany.
Yeah.
It's not on theme with Dom United, but that's the first thing I thought of for blue 6-drop. Sublime Epiphany. So for 4 generic and 2 blue, it's an instant. Choose 1 or more counter target spell, counter target activated or triggered ability, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, and or target player draws a card.
Wow. That's a heck of a card.
I recall, playing this, a bit on Magic Arena, whether I played it or my opponent played it, it pretty much closed the game. It just kind of did what you wanted. Got rid of their threat. You made another of your own threat. Drawing a card, can't complain with that. And being able to stifle or counterspell. It's almost icing on the cake at that point. But the for what it's worth in that low powered format, it does work.
It's hard to get both of the first 2 modes at once, right? To both counter something and stifle something. Like, that doesn't come up that often. And not that this is actually a complaint about the card. It still, does an enormous amount of work. I think the card is sweet. I run it in Petty Nobility, where games are slower and it's more, Jenny Johnny oriented. I don't run it in Aleasis because there I think it's just miserably slow, right? It's not where you want to be. You're going to get too much pressure to sit around and hold up 6 mana and do a bunch of stuff. It feels a little bit similar to Draining Welk, which is another 6 mana counter, and then you get to create a creature out of it.
Sure.
But this is so much better than Draining Welk, because Draining Welk simply can't be cast until you're countering something, right?
Right, you get nothing out of it. It's it's like it's worse than Mystic Snake. You can just play Mystic Snake on retail and just flash 4 mana 2/2. But the Draining Welk, you really want to be in for countering that spell and get the sort of mana drain analogy to just a bigger creature.
I was playing Magic with my 6-year-old earlier, and
nice.
Oh yeah,
Did he beat you?
Oh, he did. Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Heck yeah. He was playing a mono blue deck and I was playing a mono green deck, just some sort of kitchen table decks we'd put together, And his MVP, which he insisted I take a picture of, was Frost Titan. So there's a 6-mana blue big boy. Yeah. I'd ramped out, I don't know what it was, something with keyword big in green, and that was going to look to stabilize me. I think it even had reach because he had a bunch of flyers too. And nope, Frost Titan hits the board, and that's that. That's the game over for my poor green deck. Yeah. So that's cute. But I guess I'll give a shout out to a card I've been having fun with in the context of Cartographia, a new cube that I ran on MTGO, and that is Cyber Drive Awakener. This is from...
I have no idea what that is.
I know. I just said a bunch of nonsense words, right? It's from Neon Dynasty, but from the Commander, one of the Commander products. Cyber Drive Awakener is 5 and a blue for a 4/4 artifact creature construct. It has flying, and it says other artifact creatures you control have flying. That's pretty cool. And when it enters the battlefield, until the end of that turn, each non-creature artifact you control becomes an artifact creature with base power and toughness 4/4. And of course, they're flying because this thing grants flying to everything. So it just picks up all your rocks and your retrofitter foundry and, all this stuff you got lying around, experimental synthesizers or whatever. You're just nonsense artifacts sitting around the battlefield, and all of a sudden they're flying 4/4s, and you swing in for $1 million when this thing enters the battlefield. So it's kind of a cool artifact creature lord.
There's a very different design for blue, but I can get behind that. That's fun.
Yeah, it's cool, and I like those the Ensoul artifact kind of effects, and like Rise and Shine, and we got different ways of animating the inanimate. It's maybe similar to the Antiquities War a little bit in that as well. That's that saga that on the 3rd chapter of the saga, artifacts you control become artifact creatures with base power and toughness 5/5 until end of turn. It's a similar idea, but you get to see that coming from a mile away with the Antiquities War.
For sure. Yeah, there's no reading ahead in that saga.
No, one of the original sagas from, as it happens, Dominaria. Our first go around on it. And we are taking a second crack at it now. So I guess to introduce this just a little bit, Dominaria United has come out, and we're on the verge of the Brothers War coming out. So I'm feeling very behind on keeping up with all these Magic sets. I've had things like CubeCon, which went swimmingly, and I had that Cartographia cube on MTGO. That is to say, I haven't been keeping up to date with the latest releases for, the cubes that I try to keep up to date with. So I'm feeling like way behind. However, I've got an expert here in the person of Stephen Konefal, who's an awesome cube designer and a wonderful person, just a pillar of the community. I'm so delighted that you're here and joining me, Stephen. Thank you.
I'm glad to be here, John.
I know you've got much more experience than do I with this set. You've been drafting this set. You've been thinking about it in terms of cube. I've thought about it a small amount in terms of cube because I have put a smattering of these cards in that new cube I designed, Cartographia. But that was like some quick cherry picking for things that fit well into that particular environment. And I simply haven't sat down and gone through things with a fine-tooth comb. So I am very much looking forward to getting your insight.
I was looking through the list, making my notes for reflection towards Elaesis and Petty Nobility. I do think this set does offer a wide range for different cubes outside of that as well. I think the set plays very well in itself. So if someone were to hypothetically make a set cube or a Dominaria based cube, people that remember playing original Invasion, I think, which the set draws a lot of inspiration from for sure. It has a lot of cool things going on, and the limited play, in itself is just fantastic. Is very, very rich, even while being, relatively simple compared to sets that we've had recently, like the like the Baldur's Gate set and Streets of New Capenna and Kamigawa, that just just has a lot going on, and even a lot of the cards just feel like you're reading a novella. But here it has very, 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 very clean stuff going on. Okay, so Sat is very low on 1-drops, so there's nothing that I thought that would be really helpful for your white or white red or white splash whatever aggro deck. There's no Savannah Lions with upside in this set, which makes sense because it is a very slow format, so a lot of the time you're kind of building up basically your land base turn 1, turn 2, and things start to really get going around turn 3 in this set. But there is a sorcery in Runic Shot. For 1 white, it destroys target tapped creature, but it has a kicker cost of a blue. If this spell was kicked, scry 2. Now, I like it just at retail value. For a white, it destroys a target tapped creature. There are caveats, however. It is sorcery speed, and it can only target a tapped creature, which has the implication that in order to kill the creature that is opposing you, it had to have attacked you at some point. So you are taking a hit. So that's not necessarily great, but the concept of being able to get rid of a threat for 1 mana and still potentially have a play during your first or second main phase, there's still some inherent value to that. The kicker cost, very incidental. The scry 2, it is nice. It's a nice to have, but it's not a need to have. So would I play this in a mono white deck? Most likely. But I don't know. I'm curious how you feel about that in regards to your keep sensibilities.
Yeah, okay. Well, I've got a story about this card, as it turns out.
Ooh.
I guess I'll give you my initial take on the card, and then I'll tell you the story when this card beat me up. Swords to Plowshares, Path to Exile, wow. These are some cards right among the best removal in Magic. And it's awesome that this does a kind of impersonation of those, at least insofar as this is a single white mana pip to do a thing. But as you say, the thing having to be tapped, that's a drawback, and a major drawback. And probably the even bigger drawback is the fact that it's a sorcery, obviously, because you could also rationalize this. Like the tap thing wouldn't be as bad if this were instant, and you could Runic Shot them at instant speed before they deal damage, right? Like after they've tapped to attack. That would be sweet, but we can't do that. So I'm sort of down on the card, but then I do have more respect for the card than it might sound like from my description of it so far, because when I was at CubeCon, I was staying at a house with 7 other guys, an Airbnb with 7 other guys, and 7 + 1 makes 8.
Seems like a perfect number to have a 8-person draft to me.
It does. We dubbed ourselves the Maison de Cube, and there were a bunch of awesome cats there. And so I was playing the Live the Dream Cube with David McDarby from WotC and David White,
Nice.
and they're the co-designers of the Live the Dream Cube that's been up 4 times now on Moto. Both awesome cats.
Great Davids, yeah.
I drafted a Boros aggro deck. I mean, aggro sort of in scare quotes because it's the Live the Dream Cube, but which is to say that like a red deck wins deck isn't supposed to exist there. Like something truly aggressive isn't supposed to exist there. But I'd made a darn good try at it, and I drafted a very aggressive deck, and it curve capped out at 4 for Winota and for Chandra Torch of Defiance. So I had a real lean, mean curve and Live the Dream Cube. I was steamrolling people. Anyway, McDarby had an Azorius control deck, and I had attacked him, so there was still that issue that I was putting damage in on him, but then he went Runic Shot into Snapcaster Mage into Runic Shot, and that felt like a real beating. He killed 2 of my guys, and he put a blocker up on the board, and that really changed the shape of that game dramatically and increased my respect for Runic Shot quite a bit.
Probably didn't even need to scry 2. It was like, no, I'm good.
I don't think he even scried.
Pass a turn. What do you got? All right. Yeah. The next card that I have in white is Resolute Reinforcements. For a generic in a white, you get a human soldier 1/1 that has flash. And when Resolute Reinforcements enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. So this is an impersonation of Raise the Alarm, I believe, which is just a 1 in a white instant that creates 2 soldier tokens. I like this because you have archetypes in petty nobility that care about tokens and blinking things, and this is something that plays into both. Being able to blink the resolute reinforcements, the card itself, to get another soldier onto the field.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. That's super cool. I love the call out to, or call back to, Raise the Alarm. That's sweet. And I mean, we've got another. I just love how WotC has these little in jokes, or like, things that it continues to cite over time. Like Gather the Townsfolk is like, slow sorcery version of Raise the Alarm. The alarm's been raised and the townsfolk are coming shambling out of their huts or whatever. But yeah, no, I'm with you. This is super cool. I like, you're entirely correct that in petty nobility, blink is a thing that we might be interested in doing, and this is a good target for blink, and that's important. It's important that it's a 2-mana white spell that's blinkable for value, because I've got a long list of white 2-drop creatures in the cube, and almost all of them, like, they just don't do anything. If you blink them, it's hard to find that in white at 2. There's like Charming Prince that does a whole host of things, so that's cool. Skyclave Cleric is the MDFC land from Zendikar Rising that could enter the battlefield as a tapped white source, or on the other side, it's a 2-mana 1/3 that gains 2 when it enters the battlefield. So you could like blink that, you could blink that dog and draw another card, Spirited Companion. I mean, maybe it sounds like I'm listing a lot of things, but honestly, I'm not. So it would be cool to have another version of something like Attended Night, or the Eldrazi Sky Spawner, or in white and blue and black in particular. I think we've got these like 3-mana cards that'll give you an extra body that are blinkable, but that's harder to find in white at 2.
Yeah, I forgot about the Spirited Companion, and I almost think you could maybe consider doing a 1-for-1 swap for that, but I would think the card draw would probably be a little bit more valuable, but it's still in a way card advantage, because if you're blinking it, you're just building up your board, and is it better to just kind of see what's on the top of your deck, or be able to you sort of build up your field, how fragile is the strategy, so on. But yeah, I forgot about the Spirited Companion, and it's a tough call, to be honest. I actually, as much as I like just being able to kind of go wide and put creatures on the field, I think I kind of like the card draw just a little bit more. But yeah,
Draws cards. It draws cards.
Yeah,
Steven.
I mean, it draws cards. I'm talking to the card drawing master right now, of course.
No, I'm being glib. I can certainly see an environment wherein resolute reinforcements is what you'd rather be blinking. I can see that. If we've got Orcish Oriflamme effects and stuff, and you've got this big go wide thing, and you care about tokens entering the battlefield and doing things. But in a vacuum, if the question is, do you want to draw a card or do you want to create a 1/1 token? And I know which I'm picking like all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. The next one is Argivian Cavalier. For 2 generic in a white, you get a 2/2 Orc Knight that has Enlist. As this creature attacks, you may tap a non-attacking creature you control without summoning Sickness. When you do, add its power to this creature's power until the end of turn. When Argivian Cavalier enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. We have seen this before. I think it was in M13, actually. It was Attended Knight. You get, for 2 and a white, you have a 2/2 human knight. It has first strike, and when Attended Knight hits the battlefield, you create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. I wouldn't think of it as necessarily a 1-for-1 swap. I think, the difference between Enlist and first strike is not ignorable. But I do like Enlist as a new combat-oriented ability. I've been treating it as a pseudo exalted, so sort of version of that where maybe you have a couple creatures with exalted, your attacks don't necessarily seem to line up. It doesn't make sense to kind of go all in, but you attack with this one creature, it gets a little bonus, and so your opponent may be forced to make some difficult blocks. And in List, it plays very similarly in Dominaria United, where you don't really want to swing with all of your creatures. So
yeah, that's cool. It's an interesting card, and Enlist is interesting. So Enlist is the like spelled out banding, right? Isn't it banding that this is?
Yeah.
I mean, I understand that they're doing banding, so this just isn't the way it can work. But I wish every time I read Enlist that it worked like Convoke, in as much as I could tap whatever I wanted, darn it, and it doesn't have to not have summoning sickness. You know what I mean?
Which I think is a caveat that I have with it, is that the explanation of the ability is not very clean, and it's just being able to just have the creature that you play just be able to tap it and just kind of go for the Enlist.
I wish it worked differently, which is kind of dumb, but I mean, I guess a slightly different objection here is this mechanic, in the way that it's phrased, creates some additional cognitive load for drafters, because when we're used to this kind of effect with things like Convoke, as I said, or with things like crewing vehicles, I at least am used to the idea that I get to do these cool things and tap things for value into something else without caring about the status of summoning sickness. And that's just how it works. It's like one of the benefits of dropping your Smuggler's Copter on turn 2 and then playing anything on turn 3 and getting to tap that thing with summoning sickness and go to town immediately.
It's a great example. Yeah, it really does add some unneeded confusion for sure. All right, the next one, I'm not sure where it would go. It is Anointed Peacekeeper. For 2 generic and a white, you get a 3/3 human cleric with vigilance. As Anointed Peacekeeper enters the battlefield, look at an opponent's hand, then choose any card name. Spells your opponent's cast with the chosen name cost 2 more to cast. Activated abilities of sources with the chosen name cost 2 generic more to cast, or 2 generic more to activate, unless they're mana abilities. I've played with this card and I've played against this card, and it is absolutely annoying. It is a pain, but we've seen White do effects with this recently with the Paulo Vito Damaderosa card, very similar to that. Gums up, maybe the next spell that they were thinking about casting, or even something that's already on the field that your opponent would most likely have to work around a little bit harder, such as activating a Planeswalker ability or something of the ilk.
Yeah, that's cool. I like this white taxing effect. That's very sweet. And I do like that it does a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, it lets you see their hand. It does this peek thing, which already has some amount of value attached to it, right? That ability. And then you can mess with their hand and their ability to cast their hand, or, mess with stuff that's already in play or that they've cast through the tax, and now it's in play and now there's still this additional tax. All of that's very cool.
Next card, Knight of Dawn's Light. For a generic and a white, you get a 2/2 human knight. It has first strike. If you would gain life, you gain that much life +1. And it has an activated ability for a generic and a white. Knight of Dawn's Light gets +1/+1 until the end of turn. 2 mana, 2/2 first striker. Themes great rate, right off the bat. You're in a cube that has a life gain strategy. This is life gain +1, and it's pumpable, or it has the threat of activation of being pumpable. Just being able to swing in and having the first strike makes blocking really, really tough. And very clean card with a lot going on that just very, very good on rate.
Yeah, for sure. I'm with you. It's a slam dunk in the cube. It engages with these synergies, as you discuss, like the life gain deck is going to love the thing. And also, I mean, as you say, it's a totally unembarrassing card to slam down on turn 2, and you've got this bear with first strike.
All right, next card, we have Sarah Paragon. For 2 generic and 2 white, you get a 3/4 angel. It has flying, and once during each of your turns, you may play a land from your graveyard or cast a permanent spell with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard. If you do, it gains when this permanent is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, exile it, and you gain 2 life. This is basically a 4-mana version of Luris that can't be lightning bolted easily, and it has evasion. I think it's great on rate, and it has a very fantastic graveyard, playing ability that like Luris does, without the companion bit, which may be appealing to some other players. There's a lot of criticism for companion, as an ability in general, and I don't know if that's speaking to constructed formats, but I like what this card's doing. I like the flavor of it. I like the story that it tells. This is very excellent utility, and it can absolutely bring you back late game as well as just being a strong presence early game.
I love this card. This is one of those cards that I put in Cartographia, and that's an environment that has a huge lands theme, and it runs double fetches there, as does Aleasis for that matter. So, I mean, thing number one, obviously, is you can recast fetches with this card. And fetches are like pinging you a little, they're very slowly draining your life, and that's kind of annoying. But then she just gives you some life. You crack that fetch for the second time, and you've paid 2 life to crack it twice, but all of a sudden she just pays all that life back, and you're even, but you're up a couple of lands. That's great.
Yeah, you're whole. So the next card I have here is Danitha, Benalia's Hope. For 4 generic mana and a white, you get a legendary creature, Human Knight, that's a 4/4 with first strike, vigilance, lifelink. And when Danitha, Benalia's Hope enters the battlefield, you may put an aura or equipment card from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield attached to Danitha. 5 mana is a lot, but you're getting a very strong creature on rate for that. It's first strike, vigilance, lifelink. It's a nice constellation of abilities just at the floor. When it hits the field, if you have an aura in the yard that has gone to the wayside that you haven't cast with your Sarah Paragon already, or even if you're just trying to do sort of a 2-for-1, you've got an equipment in your hand that you haven't played because you spent your 5 mana just casting this night. Just slap it on, and now your Danitha's got a Bone Splitter, even for something as simple as that. Now you've got a 6/4.
Right, with first strike, vigilance, and lifelink. That sounds pretty good.
Right. So this is a cute card to me. It's not gonna. I don't think it's making or breaking any cube formats, but I do think this is a cute cube card, and probably fairly inexpensive for people that like this sort of gameplay and limited.
Fair enough. I wish the card could also pick something up off the field. That would be sweet.
That's the one thing that I think is missing, that I 100% agree. That would have been super nice. All right, next card is Leyline Binding. This is an enchantment for 5 generic and a white. It has flash, and it has domain. This spell costs 1 generic less to cast for each basic land type among lands you control. And when Leyline Binding enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent and opponent controls until Leyline Binding leaves the battlefield. At the floor, this is a 5 mana Oblivion Ring with flash, assuming that you're at least playing with Plains cards to cast this white spell. But if you're a cube that is basically tasting the rainbow, you've got 50 lands to fix up all your color fixing, and you're getting really greedy with the mana base, this essentially becomes a 1-drop. This is in Magical Christmas Land, this is the enchantment version of Swords to Plowshares that, depending on how you build your cube, could be very difficult to get rid of. I don't know how valuable disenchant or naturalize effects are, but I think this card is very, very good. And I think if you're playing with triomes and shocks in the ilk, I think this is going to be a very effective removal spell in your white or white splash.
I'm with you. I think this card is great. I think it makes an interesting comparison to Prismatic Ending from Modern Horizons 2. It's a sorcery for white and X, and it has Converge, exile target non-land permanent if its mana value is less than or equal to the number of colors of mana spent to cast this spell. So you could pay just a single white and you could exile something that's 1 MV or less. But as you can feed more colors into it, you can get bigger things. And that's a sweet card. I like Prismatic Ending. But Prismatic Ending is very different from this card because they're being costed in sort of opposite ways based on how they're scaling, which I may be making no sense. But for Prismatic Ending, you need the colors to get the bigger stuff, but you got to pay those colors into it. So the casting cost is getting more and more. Whereas in the case of Leyline Binding, you're starting at 6 mana, although, as you say, really you're secretly starting at 5 mana because you've already got white, presumably, if you're casting this thing. You've probably got planes. And then the cost is getting reduced and reduced as you got more colors figuring into the matter. And it has flash, which is, better than a sorcery speed thing, although the enchantment can be blown up.
Yeah, your Leyline Binding is almost better late game as you're building your board and your mana base, whereas
that's true.
Prismatic Ending, that's almost good regardless of what stage that you're in the game. You're playing you drop your planes turn 1, they go turn 1, Birds of Paradise. It's as if, all right, I'm just gonna get rid of that. So, and you can do that. All right, let's move into blue. There's a few cards in here. The first one I want to bring up is Shore Up. This is an instant that costs 1 blue. Target creature you control gets +1/+1 and gains hexproof until the end of turn. Untap it. This is a very neat combat trick. And being an instant in Dom United, it worked really well with the creatures that cared when you cast your instant and sorcery spells to get pumps. It didn't have prowess explicitly, but prowess-like. And this is a fine combat trick and a good counter against Doomblade and the ilk of removal. It makes attacking or blocking a little bit more favorable for you. Yeah, this is a cute card. Cute cube card that I think was worth considering, but I'm not sure which environment that you would prefer to have it outside of a sort of a blue or blue-red spells kind of matter deck.
It reminds me of Ranger's Guile, and I'm sure there's plenty other cards like this. Ranger's Guile is a single green mana for an instant that gives +1/+1 and hexproof. Doesn't do the untap thing, though.
Right.
And that's a cute trick that can come out of nowhere and blank opponent's removal or something very inexpensively. That's a cool thing. I cubed that once upon a time. I haven't in a long time. I totally see what you're saying, though, that Shore Up, it's not only got the upside of untap it, but it's got the upside of blue, where, as you were just describing, actually casting spells is often more meaningful than the same kind of endeavor that we're doing in green.
Absolutely. Almost 2 different cards, even with or without the untap clause. Next one is Timely Interference. This is also an instant for 1 blue, and it does have a kicker of a generic and a red. And it reads, target creature gets -1/-0 until the end of turn. If the spell is kicked, that creature blocks this turn if able, and, wait for it, draw a card.
Yes, draw a card. Music to my ears.
Exactly. I think that's almost the key to the spell, right? It's that it's essentially 1 blue, draw a card. And there's been instances where I've played this or other people have played this where end of turn, I'm just going to target my own creature just to effectively cycle this spell and maybe just to get a trigger or just to make the draws smooth out, a bit better. So I think, more often than not, this is just going to service that. Again, it's in blue. It's going to trigger prowess and prowess-like abilities. It replaces itself. Yeah. I mean, I think you preach it better than I or, really anybody else can as far as the value of, what's worse than one blue, draw a card? What else are you going to do with your mana, But I do like that if you are in the blue-red spells deck, that this does force some maybe undesirable blocks for your opponent to commit to, and it has that small advantage of making that opposing creature just a little bit smaller or a little bit less likely to kill the creature that's coming at them.
Blue to draw a card, I'm all about that. I love like hieroglyphic illumination, for instance, from Amonkhet, the 3 and a blue instant that says draw 2, or you cycle it for blue and it just replaces itself for a single blue. And I love that flexibility. It's an overcosted divination on the one hand, but on the other, you can just trade it in for a single blue. There's creatures like that too, like Curator of Mysteries. Isn't that the name of it? 2 blue for a 4/4 flying Sphinx.
Yes. Curator of Mysteries is 2 generic and 2 blue for 4/4 flying, but whenever you cycle or discard another card, you scry one. So, I mean, and I'm looking at your list now. It's organized by CMC, and I do see the hieroglyphics listed in your 1-drop slots. And I also see Curator also in 1-drop slot, and Boon of the Wishgiver, which I'll read out loud. It is a 1-drop, but as I'm reading it, it's 4 generic and 2 blue for sorcery. So, all right, what are we getting for sorcery speed 6 mana? You draw 4 cards. That seems pretty good, but you're probably going to use it cycling for 1 generic to pitch it and draw a card. So, yeah, the value in being able to just kind of Xerox through your deck to the pieces that you really need.
People think I'm crazy. This was true too as I was watching people drafting Cartographia. People just kept passing or like making fun of cards that I think are totally legitimate cards that people need to pay more attention to. So another one of these is Windcaller Aven. It's a 6 mana creature. It's 4 blue for a bird wizard, and it's a 4/3 flying. And that doesn't sound exciting. It's a 4/3 flyer for 6 mana. It also cycles for a single blue. So this card, any blue deck, I'm sticking this card in. I don't care, because like most of the time I'm cycling it, and that's fine. It's totally fine. It just replaces itself. I get to redraw, and I have this thing in the yard, and maybe that's useful to me in some way. If nothing else, it's helping to feed some delve or something. I don't know. But if it's like late in the game, I draw this thing and suddenly it's action, and I'm totally happy to spend 6 and put a 4/3 flyer into play, So I love that. I love that flexibility. It looks kind of dorky, but card does a lot for a person.
The thing about Windcaller Aven, though, is that you're not just cycling it, but there's opportunity for playing it as a version of Jump from Alpha, which, you pay the blue, you give a creature flying until the end of turn. So, you're looking at a battlefield that's, not great, or if you just need to get in for the win, you just cycle the Aven. It's like, all right, my best creature has flying. You can't block it. Good luck. What do you got? That's great utility. The next card, I'm more curious what you may have to say, but I think this is cute. It's Academy Lore Master. This is for blue, this is a human wizard 2/3. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player may draw an additional card. If they do, spells they cast this turn cost 2 generic more to cast. So this is a version of Howling Mine on a 2/3 human wizard, which, I don't see Howling Mine in any of your cubes, and I'm kind of quickly scrolling through the Cartographia cube.
No Howling Mine
to see one. No Howling Mine. All right, spoiler alert.
Course of Portal, yes. One-sided Howling Mine.
Yeah. But it's a creature on the field, so there's board presence there. You are giving your opponent the opportunity to draw a card, so it is symmetrical in that. But maybe the blue deck wants to just draw the additional card past the turn, and then just kind of hold up Essence Scatter or Counterspell in the and just kind of have you have your opponent play on your turns, and then at some point just don't take the free draw spell, just don't take the free draw to just play your spells at retail and build up your board and so on. But I think this card is cute.
Yeah, I can see that. It's a scary card because, I mean, Howling Mine is scary to me, especially since you're giving your opponent priority on the drawing. They get the initiative in drawing. But I totally see what you're saying, that this is a cool role player in a deck that really does want to play at instant speed on opponent's turn. And I mean, let's be real. What blue deck doesn't want to play at instant speed on opponent's turn? That's the dream. That's what we want to be doing. Yeah, so I can see that. I think the card's kind of scary to me personally, but I can see the value of it.
Yeah, next card is Joint Exploration. This is an instant for a generic and a blue. Yeah, scry 2, then draw a card. But it has a kicker cost of a green. And if this spell was kicked, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So this is, in my opinion, an easy replacement for Deliberate. And I know you're playing with Joint Exploration in Cartographia, in the I believe it's the Petty Nobility. This is just very much a version of Deliberate with a bit of upside if you're splashing green. I think this is solid. Simic is my jam, but trying to be unbiased about this, I think this is totally fine in a blue deck that doesn't play green.
Deliberates 1 in the blue for an instant that says scry 2, then draw a card. So you're comparing these two cards, and that makes total sense because this card is Deliberate, but it's got the additional kicker for a single green, which lets you do an additional thing, which is like this explore kind of effect. Throw down another land card. You can even play a land on opponent's turn using this, which is cute, right? I mean, you can imagine triggering landfall on your opponent's turn or something. Like there could be a reason that you might want to have a surprise land on their turn. So that's a cute card. It works especially well in Cartographia, I think, where we care even more about lands. And yeah, I'm with you. See what you're saying. This is a strict upgrade really to Deliberate.
World of possibility. Next card is Aether Chandler. It is a creature human wizard for 2 generic and a blue, and it's a 2/1. When Aether Chandler enters the battlefield, choose 1. Create a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying, or return another target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, or, wait for it, draw a card.
Yes.
So I noticed in the Petty Nobility, you basically have 3 mana creatures that each have one of these abilities. You have
That's awesome.
you have Aven Eternal, which is for 2 and a blue, a zombie bird warrior with flying that when it enters the battlefield, you amass 1. But effectively, you get a 1/1 and a 2/2 for 2 and a blue. And you have Cloudkin Seer, which is 2 and a blue for 2/1 elemental wizard with flying. And when it hits the field, you draw a card.
Oh, I love that card.
Right? And then you have Exclusion Mage, which is for 2 and a blue, a human wizard, a 2/2 that when it hits the field, you return target creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand. And this card basically has one of each of these. And my recommendation was maybe replacing the Exclusion Mage, but in hindsight, I wonder if this is almost too powerful in comparison to the other 3, or even just Exclusion Mage specifically. I don't think it's going to be format warping or defining, but I think this is a very strong card worth considering that, if you're playing with, Mana War, that this would be an easy upgrade. And I like the versatility that maybe they don't have anything worth bouncing, so maybe you just draw a card, or maybe there's value in getting a 1/1 white bird that can get in the air if your attacks and blocks just don't look great. And if you're playing in Blink, this is a phenomenal Blink target.
Yeah, I'm with you. The card's great, super flexible. I love all those options. I love that we're getting cards that have all these options like this. We've seen some other cute ones like Callous Blood Mage. He's 2 and a black for a 2/1 vampire warlock. And when he enters the battlefield, choose 1. You can either create a 1/1 black and green pest creature token that, when it dies, it gains 1. Or you can draw a card and lose a life, or you can exile target player's graveyard. I mean, I love that. I love this guy so much too. If I'm being honest, 90% of the time I'm doing that. I'm drawing a card, right? And I strongly suspect that
Color me shocked.
Yeah, with this guy too, it's going to be pretty similar, but I can totally see, especially later in the game or you're in a tight spot or whatever, you know, bouncing the thing, which the black creature can't do, you know, bouncing the thing could be useful. Bouncing a thing is better than exiling a graveyard often, unless you're facing a very specific deck. It's going to be more often sort of generically better to bounce something. So this even better than the black one, I think.
This hasn't happened to me, but I'm sure somebody has had the booster pack in Dominaria United draft where they open this and they open Phyrexian Rager, and it's a matter of, do I want to play black or do I want to play blue? Because it's, you're almost comparing the same, they're almost the same card. It's just, what color you want to go into.
That's true.
Neither here nor there. I don't think, I think I would take the Aether Chandler, but I mean, what was a great thing about that set is that there was really no terrible deck, so you could almost just kind of go with whatever you want. But obviously, I think that Chandler would be the easy pick over the Rager.
Yeah, that's cool, and it's a funny reminder of how far we've come, or how much design has changed over the life of Phyrexian Rager. Because I'm sure you remember there was a long moment in time in Cube design where Phyrexian Rager was like a black creature that was very often run because there was such a dearth of reasonable black creatures, and like 3 mana and so on. That was a real card, which isn't to say it can't be a real card today, but we've got many more options today.
Absolutely. All right, next card is Haughty Djinn. This is a creature Djinn for a generic and 2 blue, and it has a power of star and a toughness of 4. It has flying. It also reads, Haughty Djinn's power is equal to the number of instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard, and your instant and sorcery spells cost 1 generic less to cast. So, do you like casting spells but hate opposing volcanic hammers? I've got the card for you. I'm not sure where this card is going to fit in either Elasis or Petty Nobility. Probably leaning Petty Nobility, but I think this is a absolutely fine card in blue. Not even a build around, because if you're playing blue, you're probably playing this card, and it's probably paying off.
I'm not getting like super excited about the card, but I totally see what you're saying, that it's a totally fine card. It's got that effect like Goblin Electromancer or like Baral. It's more expensive, and so I don't cube in any of my cubes currently, Goblin Electromancer or Baral. Mm-hmm. Both 2 mana spells, Electromancer, of course, being gold, red and a blue for it, and Baral's 1 and a blue. I haven't actually found this static all that useful, which isn't to say that it isn't useful and it doesn't do things. It certainly does. I think it's at its best in spell-based combo-oriented environments, like in Storm, obviously. If I put it anywhere, I think just as you say, Petty Nobility seems like a better spot for it than Elasis, where I worry in Elasis it doesn't bring enough value to the table on its own. Sort of a Baneslayer kind of problem it faces in Elasis, I think.
Fair comparison, absolutely. Next card is Tolarian Terror. This is a creature serpent for 6 generic in a blue and a 5/5. But this spell costs 1 generic less to cast for each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard, and it has Ward 2, which reads, whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, counter it unless that pair plays 2 generic. This is a tough card to get around, but if you are playing the deck where you are cycling your Boon of the Wishgiver, your Hieroglyphics, you're playing your Opt, your Consider, this is a pretty inexpensive card to cast as the game goes on. And I, myself, the most I have done, I've played 2 Tolarian Terrors for 1 in a match and still had a card left to leave my opponent wondering, geez, what else does he have?
Wow, awesome.
And it's great in the right build around. And I kind of warmed up to Ward. I used to be a fan of Hexproof, but I've sort of grown to see where Hexproof is placed on creatures that just seem insurmountable. I think Tolarian Terror is easily, or at least can easily be a one drop late game and a lot of cubes, and it makes for good interaction.
Oh, yeah. I love it. I love it. If you're playing the kind of deck I love playing, and in the sort of cubes that I designed that allow for this sort of thing, where Xerox strategy is widely supported, and we've got all of these inexpensive spells, generally, inexpensive counter magic and inexpensive cantrips and cycling, just as you described. This card's great, and you're going to be able to slam it relatively early. And it sounds like that's your experience even in retail limited, which is going to be an environment that's not tuned in quite the same way for this sort of thing. I don't know about you, but I still love some hoary old creatures like the Tombstalkers of the world, Gurmag Anglers of the world, that are also just big dumb dudes, but ones that you can power out quickly if you're able to fill your graveyard. And we got a bunch of fetches or whatever, or just cheap spells. And I love it. They can be real threats.
I'm definitely a fan. In the lower power sense, the names that you mentioned, those are cards that I do enjoy specifically for that. They're also just very clean cards on text. Like the Gurmag Angler is a big O 5/5. The mana value is 7, but you could easily cast it for 1 mana after exiling your graveyard. And I do like Murktide Region as a card in the higher level powered cubes as well. So
yeah, Murktide Region is a beating. That's in Petty Nobility, and I'm actually thinking I maybe should take it out of Petty Nobility because I think it's just sort of too good. And when you've all of a sudden got this 8/8 dragon with evasion, it can be very difficult to interact with there.
I think I missed that going through the list. I'm kind of surprised to hear that. You might have substituted for Ethereal Forger, which.
Well, I'm so smart that I don't even remember how smart I am. So just before CubeCon, I made some last minute changes, and that's totally great. That was one of the things that was pissing me off about it. And I was like, before I'm taking this to Wisconsin, we're going to put Ethereal Forger in there, which is also, sort of a similar card too to some we've been describing. That's a similar card, right? It's got Delve, and it does things, whatever. It's cool. It's a cool card too.
I think Ethereal Forge is probably a more interesting. I kind of hate using that word, but where the Murktide, you're building a game where that card basically just finishes the game. You just get a big O dragon for, I'm using bunny quotes here, cheap, because you built your deck to be that way. But Ethereal Forger, you're you just get a 3/3 flyer. It's basically a phantom monster, but for 2 blue mana. But there's that possibility when you go to combat, your opponent's thinking, okay, what did my opponent exile? What are they going to cast that might change the game? And does the game, is the game still worthwhile to go on after this combat happens and this attack trigger goes on? So I think that adds a different layer of gameplay versus, all right, I play this 8/8, I'm gonna swing, do you have a blocker? No? Okay, let's go to game 2.
Yeah.
So I think there's value to that.
I'm with you.
So moving to black, starting off with Cut Down. This is an instant for 1 black, and it reads, destroy target creature with total power and toughness 5 or less. Very clean kill card. I think there's a lot that's been said about this for as long as this card's been out. I don't know the numbers for your cubes. I know that you've ran the numbers for your cubes, so you know this a little bit better than I do. I think this is clean 1 mana instant, which is great. Kills at least most of the important or at least early stuff that comes on. It's like a black bolt against your opponent's Birds of Paradise or Llanowar Elf. This is good, and it's cute in that it's 1 mana. It still has some restriction, but can be powerful nonetheless.
Love the card. I love inexpensive interaction. We're all shocked to learn, I'm sure. I'm the guy who'll run every volcanic hammer known to man. Fire Ambush. What a card.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love inexpensive interaction in black, and I run a whole gamut of it in Aleasis. And I did run the numbers, as you say, in the description to our podcast. I can put a link to that tweet that has an infographic. And I compared Ulcerate, Fatal Push, Vendetta, Cut Down, and Disfigure. Of these, Cut Down was the fourth best. So that may not sound great. However, in Aleasis, in this particular environment, right, that I'm comparing it to, Cut Down hits 77% of the creatures in the environment. I mean, wow, that's a lot, more than 3/4 of the creatures in the environment. So
Seems good.
Seems good. Yeah, play it. And it doesn't have any silly, like, you can't target black creatures or you can't target artifacts or anything. You can just hit stuff provided the power and toughness add up. I'm running Cut Down in Cartographia, so I've gotten a chance to play it there a good bit. One thing that my infographic doesn't get at is, so Ulcerate, for instance, is my top performer. It's a single black instant. Target creature gets -3/-3 until end of turn, and you lose 3 life. That hits 84% of the creatures in the cube, which is a ton. It's secretly even better than Cut Down in the sense that, well, I think so, because that -3/-3, the shrinking thing, is actually super relevant. So Cut Down, it either kills something or it doesn't kill something. Like, it's able to target something or it's not able to target something, right? Ulcerate can target whatever you want. So you can get in a combat situation. I mean, I suppose this is dead obvious. And like, they've got a 5/5 and you've got a 3/3, and you block their 5/5 with your 3/3 and you ulcerate the thing. And all of a sudden their 5/5's a 2/2 and you still manage to kill it then. Like, Ulcerate can punch above its weight with help in a way that Cut Down is never going to be able to do.
That's true. I will say I do like that dynamic. Yeah, it's a nice gotcha moment. Next up is Cult Conscript. This is a creature skeleton warrior for a black. It's a 2/1. When Cult Conscript enters the battlefield tapped. For 1 in a black, you may return Cult Conscript from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only if a non-skeleton creature died under your control this turn. I think this seems pretty apt in Aleasis, but I am not sure what it would replace, as Aleasis is almost filled to the brim with, 1 mana or 1 black mana, 2/1s with, varying come back into play abilities and different versions of can't block or enter the battlefield tapped, but I'm counting 1, 2, 3. I guess Gravecrawler counts 4. So those are the ones I see that have a similar, come back from the dead. And then 1 mana 2/1s, and Diagraph Ghouls a 1 mana 2/2, and then Lacerator's just a 1 mana 2/2. So yeah, you've got 8 1-drops with 7 1-drops with 2 power. The Knight of the Ebon Legion snuck in there. That's a great card, by the way. I love the design on that and the playability. But really, you've got 7 of these 1 mana 1 mana 2 power creatures. Why not another one?
Yeah, we support black aggro. I keep threatening to take black aggro back out again and put Reanimator in again, because I kind of those two. I don't know. Yeah, but black aggro is still in there. This is a great black aggro card. It used to be black aggro wasn't really, it was just extremely difficult to support in Cube. We're talking like 5 years ago or whatever, but WotC keeps printing cards for us, and that's great. So this guy's a good one, and then you flagged another guy, also a good one, and honestly probably an even better one.
So Evolved Sleeper is a creature human for a black, and it's a 1/1. It has 3 activated abilities. First one, for a black, Evolved Sleeper becomes a human cleric with base power and toughness 2/2. For a generic in a black, if Evolved Sleeper is a cleric, put a Death Touch counter on it, and it becomes a Phyrexian human cleric with base power and toughness 3/3. And then for a generic black, if Evolved Sleeper is a Phyrexian, put a +1/+1 counter on it, then you draw a card and lose a life. Once you get up to level 3, you just got a great mana sink to draw cards and have a creature that becomes just a little bit more tough to kill in combat. This card is great in whatever you put it in. I really, really like this design. Nice mono black Figure of Destiny.
Mono black Figure of Destiny. You can level at instant speed, which is sweet, which is true of Figure, but not true of like...
Student of Warfare.
I mean, this is a minor point, but Student of Warfare with that level up ability that can only be done at sorcery speed. This guy you can level up whenever. It's also sort of cute. I don't know how super relevant this is, but you can keep triggering that last ability if you want. If you've got just mana lying around, you can keep dumping 3 into him and drawing a card and putting a counter on him. It's nice.
Next one is also really great, in my humble opinion. This is Shieldred the Apocalypse. This is a legendary creature, Phyrexian Praetor, for 2 generic and 2 black. It's a 4/5 with Death Touch, and whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. And whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. This card is absolutely busted. You just open this and you build a black deck. And specifically in Dom United, this is a great card. And what's also kind of nice, it can be dealt with, but it's going to cost you the longer it takes, because if you're on the opposing side, just taking the game action of drawing a card, you lose 2 life. So you're already on a clock, and your opponent is gaining life whenever they draw a card. So the divide becomes wider as turns go on. So it just has to be dealt with immediately, which I think Aleasis would probably have many ways to deal with it. I'm not sure if Petty Nobility would.
No, I don't think it fits there. No, I think it's too busted there.
Yeah, I think, and yeah, I was going to say, I do have a soapbox thing. I still can't get over that this isn't a 5/5, and I'm just thinking, what's the deal? It's got all this other stuff on it. Why can't it just be a 5/5? They made it a 4/5. It just looks ugly, John. I'm sorry, I can't get over it. I keep thinking, is this violate the spirit of the reserved list? Did they think, no, there's no way we could make a card that's more powerful than Juzam Jin? We can't just have another 4-mana 5/5 creature. If we do, it has to deal 2 damage to you arbitrarily every upkeep. They just made this card and they made it a 4/5. I'm sorry. It's probably the short version of what I have to say about it. I could go on, but yeah, no, Shieldred's great, and I do see where this is not an easy fit for you have going. I think it might be too strong in Petty Nobility and maybe not strong enough in Aleasis.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, my reservation about her, I fully grant that she's a very powerful card, and a card that can be like super obnoxious to play against. But then on the other hand, also a Baneslayer, and in Aleasis that's something that can be punished. Card that just like you resolve her and she does stone nothing. That's not great. Opponent could answer her right then and there, or opponent draws a card and loses 2 life and then kills her. I mean, I guess she's done a little something, but we're not getting super excited about that probably.
I know the comparison of Baneslayer versus Mulldrifters, but that's a principle I tend to either forget or in a way just put to the side just for whatever imaginations I have when putting a cube together, playing.
It's simplistic, right? It's certainly not. It doesn't have to be taken as gospel, but it's a shorthand way of reading cards. And I do know people who quite like it, like our friend Chill MTG.
He does. He likes that card.
Yeah, he does. And he came around on it. I haven't talked with him at length about it, but I remember talking with him about the card early on during spoiler season. And we were both a little like, seems fine. But I know that since he's played with it, and I guess maybe Moto Vintage Cube or some environment like that, he's come around quite a bit, and he's a big fan now.
All right, the last black card is a saga. It's the Cruelty of Gix. It's an enchantment saga for 3 generic and 2 black. It has read ahead. You choose a chapter and start with that many lore counters. Add 1 after your draw step. Skip chapters don't trigger. Sacrifice after chapter 3. Chapter 1 reads, target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a creature or planeswalker card from it. That player discards that card. Chapter 2, you search your library for a card, put that card into your hand, then shuffle. You lose 3 life. In Chapter 3, you put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It's an expensive saga. There is a story in it. If you are doing, Chapter 1, there's that possibility of, you look at your opponent's hand, maybe you pick their best thing. And 2 turns later, you get to reanimate it. I think that's probably pretty cute in Petty Nobility, but it just does a lot of different things. And having the read ahead, you get to choose your own story, so to speak, as far as how you want to play this out. So it could just be a 5-mana reanimate spell, which in this case it reanimates from either graveyard. It's not just yours. It's could be the best thing in your opponent's graveyard too, but maybe there's some value in tutoring the turn before if you really need to, but it's got some options. I think I've only seen one game where it was punishing to start at chapter 1 and then they had to go to chapter 2 and lose the 3 life, and it did set that player back a bit, and they had to play a little bit more carefully just to stay in the game.
I think you could just read the last chapter and the card looks sort of fine. Like in Petty Nobility, I'm running a reanimator package, but it's designedly a slower one because we're supposed to be not killing people on turn 1. Darn it, we're not. We're not going.
Yeah.
We're not going Entomb Reanimate or anything. So I do run stuff like I run 4-mana reanimation spells like Zombify, and at 4 mana I'm only running things that hit your own yard. And then once you get to 5 mana, I permit the reanimate anything thing. So I've got currently, I guess, just Necromantic Summons in there, which is a 5-mana sorcery that returns any creature from any yard, and you can put counters on it and whatever. So this thing is that, right? It could be a Necromantic Summons sort of card, but obviously it can be all these other things as well beforehand. So that's super cool. I like it. That's a neat card. Thank you.
We pause for a moment to recognize the charitable organization that this podcast is supporting. Stephen Konefal has chosen our charity today, which is the Children's Miracle Network Hospitals. This organization has been around since 1983, and it raises money for 170 hospitals all across North America in support of their children's care. Stephen Konefal is a pediatric intensive care nurse, and I know no one as dedicated as he to the health and welfare of the youngest and most vulnerable among us. The Children's Miracle Network Hospitals group supports Stephen's organization, but it also supports many more organizations beyond his. I'm donating all of my ad revenue since my last podcast to the Children's Miracle Network Hospitals, and I hope that you'll consider a donation as well.
All right, so moving on to red. First off is Shivan Devastator. This is a creature Dragon Hydra for red and X. It's a 0/0 with flying haste, and Shivan Devastator enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. I think this is a pretty good threat at any cost. It has haste, so this could be a 3-mana 2/2 haste if you really need it to, but it gets better as the game goes on. I kind of jokingly said, one of my favorite very simple dragons actually comes from Mirage. It's Volcanic Dragon. It's 4 generic and 2 red for a dragon. That's a 4/4 with flying haste, and that's it. That's the end of it. So for the same amount of mana, you cast Shivan Devastator, you get a 5/5 flying haste, but then which is strictly better than Volcanic Dragon. But then for 5 mana, you get a 4/4 flying haste, and it's still strictly better than Volcanic Dragon.
That's true.
2 things though. I noticed that I did not see any X spells in red for your environments, and I'm kind of quickly going through the cartographia, and I also don't see that as well. And the other thing, one of the first things my friend Mike Bergoli had mentioned is that this isn't a card that you can really reanimate with. So if it goes to the yard, it's effectively a 0/0. So this is only as good as you can cast it. That being said, it's this is a card that scales up. If you need to play it as a 3/3 bozo, you can do that if you need to. But it's good flexibility.
Yeah, it is. I appreciate that flexibility. I really like things that scale like this. The haste is super nice. It just hits them. The counters could be a thing in Petty Nobility, right? The +1/+1 counters.
For sure, yeah.
It's a card that I think in petty nobility I'd actually be slightly concerned about, just for how it can have this keyword big. You know how in environments, at least this is the way I think about environments often, I tune them to specific power and toughnesses often. Not that everything has to have that power and toughness, but there's kind of a default power band that things fall in and that things don't exceed except on rare occasions. And I think this is especially important for flyers, just because flyers are so darn hard to interact with, right? So my threshold for flyer toughness is typically 4, because otherwise they can just get too hard to kill and like things don't rumble in the air very well. And Shivan Devastator, wow, could just totally blow past that, although albeit with, a fair amount of mana investment in it. The X and a red, I see what you mean about how this is better than Volcanic Dragon at all these different rates. It's also, here I'm thinking more in Power Max terms, like the card is fine, but I mean, the rate isn't actually quite as good as you might want it to be in modern Power Max, like where we would prefer to get square stats or even better. Certainly in green, we can find options for doing things that are going to be better statted. Even like green spells. There's a spell, Wild Call, that I don't think gets enough love. Wild Call, it's a sorcery from Fate Reforged. It costs X, green, green, and it says manifest the top card of your library and then put X +1/+1 counters on it. So at minimum, you're getting a bear. Right. I mean, you're getting a manifest, right? And then any mana you dump into it beyond that, it's going to scale linearly. So if you drop 10 mana into the thing, you're going to get a 2/2 with 8 counters on it, and you're going to have a 10/10. Plus, it's a manifest. So like you could have something cool under there that you flip and it's got 8 counters on it on it now, I don't know.
Seems gross.
Yeah, seems gross. So we are paying for the flying and haste here by being like slightly less mana efficient than we might like it to be in terms of converting that mana into stats.
All right, next one is Electrostatic Infantry. This is a creature dwarf wizard for generic and red. It's a 1/2 with trample, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Electrostatic Infantry. This is a pretty strong include for the red-blue spells deck. It has the pseudo prowess, but you get a +1/+1 bonus, or you get a good advantage in the combat at that point. But this is a very simple but effective spell to get on the field that could potentially get out of hand or require an answer.
Hell yeah, that's cool. I like it a lot. And it's got all that trickiness that's implicit in the prowess type effects where you can be in combat and then surprise, you cast a whatever and then your things grow. I love it interacts with +1/+1 counters and that it's like prowess, but it sticks around. Oh, that's super cool. When I was playing with my kid earlier in that blue deck that he beat me over the head with, he was playing stuff like Jeskai Sage as well, which is
nice.
Yeah, 1 and a blue for a 1/1 creature who's got prowess. And when he dies, he draws a card. So there's that. There's that upside. But this thing, except for that drawing a card, just makes Jeskai Sage look kind of embarrassing, right? Because like the stats are better to begin with. The prowess thing sticks around. It's got trample. Wow.
All right. Next card is Yapamaya Steel Crusher. It's a creature ape warrior for generic and a red. It's a 2/2 with enlist. And it has 1 mana, sacrifice Yapamaya Steel Crusher to destroy target creature. So this is a shatter that attacks and blocks. It's cute. As I said, I do like the enlist mechanic, but I'm not really sure where it fits into your design sensibilities.
I do run cards like this. We've got versions of it that aren't like 100% the same, but there's stuff like Goblin Crater Maker, which is a super sweet card. 1 in a red for a 2/2. You can pay 1 and sack him, and either he deals 2 damage to a creature or he destroys a colorless non-land permanent.
That's right. I think I kind of like that card a little bit better. Yeah. Think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I might as well, although it doesn't have the enlist thing, of course. And there's been some other kind of takes on this, like there's a really There's a card from Eldraine, I think, had the adventure mechanic, and I think when it goes on an adventure, it is a shatter, and then you can play it as a creature.
Oh yeah, I think it's, is it battle display is the adventure part, and then yeah, I forget the name of it, but yeah.
I mean, I love this idea, and I mean, this is something I bang on about, and that I'm sure isn't news to you, and something that you are sympathetic to as well. But it's hard for me to justify, as I'm building a deck, putting like literal naturalize or literal shatter or whatever in the deck, unless I'm in a specific environment, in which case that, if I'm playing the artifact cube, then obviously you main deck the shatter, obviously. But in most cube environments, I would like access to that effect, but I don't want to main deck it, So I love these effects like this guy you're calling out here, the Yavimaya Steel Crusher, that it's a bear with some other upsides, but also it's a shatter. That's great. That's how I want to take my shatters.
Yeah, we'll have to talk more about the idea of naturalize when we get to Terra Sunder in the gold section, which I know, I'm actually kind of looking forward to. But anyway, moving along to Jaya Fiery Negotiator. This is a Planeswalker Jaya for 2 generic and 2 red. It has 4 loyalty counters, and for +1 loyalty, you create a 1/1 red monk creature token with prowess.
Yes, a red 1/1 with prowess. I love it.
Right. Yeah. Like right off the bat, just makes a creature that in theory defends itself. -1, you exile the top 2 cards of your library. You choose one of them. You may play that card this turn. -2, choose target creature an opponent controls. Whenever you attack this turn, Jaya Fiery Negotiator deals damage equal to the number of attacking creatures to that creature. In -8, you get an emblem with, whenever you cast a red instant or sorcery spell, copy it twice. You may choose new targets for the copies. It's got a lot going on. It's a 4 ability Planeswalker, but I think really the things that kind of caught my attention are really just the first 2 abilities of being able to create a 1/1 creature that has prowess, or the -1 of being able to kind of look at the top 2 and play the best one of those 2. You just kind of go back and forth between those 2. The other stuff, the ultimate, I think in a red deck, if you're still in the game 4 or 5 turns after this hits the table, I'm not sure what the red deck is doing if it hasn't won already.
Right.
The third ability, the -2, just a little wordy. So I'm almost looking at this Planeswalker just for the first 2 abilities of just being able to put some feet on the ground or just making your draws a little bit better.
Yeah. Oh, I'm with you. This looks great. I haven't gotten to play with her at all, but I'm very much looking forward to it. So to me, this is entirely theory crafting, but she looks excellent. I'm very excited. She doesn't look to me to be better than our sort of litmus test for 4-mana red Planeswalkers, which is Chandra, Torch of Defiance. But she looks like a good complement to Chandra. I love that she protects herself, and she protects herself with these creatures that have prowess, which is super sweet, and which obviously we're all about. Trigger the kind of deck that wants Jaya. And then, yeah, she draws you cards. I mean, it's not exactly draws you cards, but it's close enough, especially because it's play a card rather than cast a card, which is important because it means you can play a land, right?
Absolutely.
And then, yeah, the -2, I don't totally know how to evaluate that in a vacuum, but it seems like it has to be good. It can either straight kill something or debilitate something in a way that makes blocks bad for that creature. They've got some scary 6/6, and you ping it for 3 or whatever, and then all of a sudden, whatever it blocks, it's going to die, or I don't know. I could imagine this being good, even if it's not a straight 1/8/7 necessarily. It looks exciting. It's 4 loyalty when it comes down. I like it. Have you played with this card at all, or played against the card?
For better or worse, I've not played with it or played against it. So I really don't have any actual data input or experience to kind of throw in there. For me, it's all in my head, and it's all theoretical.
Mm-hmm. But in your head, you like her?
I do. I do. I think even just being able to put a 1/1 monk is there's some value to it in a red deck. Just having the prowess is that's pretty significant. And like I said, just a very very simple stuff. Just like looking at the top two abilities. The last red card is another saga. This is the Elder Dragon War for 2 generic and 2 red. It's an enchantment saga. It has read ahead. Chapter 1, the Elder Dragon War deals 2 damage to each creature and each opponent. Chapter 2, discard any number of cards, then draw that many cards. Chapter 3, create a 4/4 red dragon token with flying. I have played this card. I do like it. I don't know how punishing it is to be in the red deck if you're low to the ground and you start off on chapter 1 and basically nuke your board if it means nuking your opponent's board. But worst case scenario, it's a 4-mana 4/4 dragon, which is not too exciting. But I have played it from chapter 1 through chapter 3, and it has done work for me just to be able to kind of clear the ground. Shocking the opponent is not nothing. Also not exciting, but it's not nothing. And then just being able to clean up my hand a bit as far as stuff that I'm not casting, or maybe I'm land flooded or whatnot, just being able to draw a new batch of cards. I think red does a lot of like Thrill of Possibility or Tormenting Voice, where you basically cast a card, pitch a card to draw 2 cards, or at the max, like draw 2 cards after pitching. Here, I've had just awful hands and then just played this, and it's like, all right, I'm going to pitch 5 cards and draw 5 new cards, and it has been totally serviceable.
I think it's a sweet card. I've gotten to play with this a good amount, actually, in the context of Cartographia, because it's an enchantment. It's a red enchantment that can do some cool stuff. I haven't actually used it in its Whip Flare mode very much, that first chapter. I usually skip that one, probably because if I'm trying to do enchantment kind of things, then like I've got some silly little things that are going to die to that baby wrath. The discarding, obviously that's sweet in an aggro deck, but also we can well imagine how we can make use of that for other purposes, like for Reanimator or something, or for Fueling Delve, or in Cartographia. I pitch lands all the time, which is like what you would sort of naturally want to do when you're looking for action, but pitching lands can be rewarded in other ways and can contribute to other strategies in this cube in particular, where we've got stuff like Crucible of Worlds and ways of recurring lands and stuff. Or my favorite is Splendid Reclamation is 3 and a green. It's from
Eldritch Moon. Yeah, it's just reprinted in Crimson Vow too. Yeah.
Yes, right. And you return all lands from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Cartography. What a beating that card is, right? We've got all these landfall triggers and stuff, and we make 1,000,000 bears with Titania or whatever the thing is. And then there's the third mode, which, as you say, you can skip directly to. So, I mean, if you want it to be, it can be a 4-mana 4/4 flying dragon, which is super sweet. Or you can find some action on your way to getting to the dragon. I think the card is not extraordinarily powerful. Like, I don't think this probably goes in a vintage cube or whatever. I don't think it honestly probably goes in Elaeus either.
Definitely not Elaeus.
But it's a super sweet card, and it goes in Cartographia, and it's very good there, I think. It does a lot of sweet things for the environment.
All right, moving on to green, we have Neshoba Brawler. This is a creature cat warrior for a generic and a green. It is a star 3 with trample, and it has domain. Neshoba Brawler's power is equal to the number of basic land types among lands you control. So this is kind of going into the Baneslayer category. It is a creature, and it's probably more comparable to a Tarmogoyf, but it's a domain Tarmogoyf, which I think has seen better days. I don't think it's necessarily in vogue in Cube. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just it just is what it is. But if you're tasting the rainbow, as I say, this can be a pretty powerful 2-drop if you're hitting your triomes. I mean, this could very well be a 3/3 for 2 mana and eventually be a 4/3 or a 5/3 at the max. And it has trample that's not that's not nothing. So, I mean, if you're in Trample Matters, this is good.
Right. So if you care about zoo, this card is awesome. And in Cartographia, I do care about zoo, and I've got, wild Nicodles and so on, and loam lions in that environment, and this fits in brilliantly. And like you can have a 5/3 trampler that you paid 2 mana for, and that's not difficult. You can even have a turn 2 5/3, like that's not insane. And playing Cartographia, there's been multiple games wherein I've played a turn 2 Scion of Draco, which is that 12 mana artifact. Here, I guess I should just read it. The cost reduction according to domain. You know what I'm talking about? Do you remember this card?
Yeah, I think it's from Modern Horizons 2.
Yeah, Scion of Draco. It's from exactly Modern Horizons 2. It costs 12 generic mana for a 4/4, and it does a bunch of stuff. Like, it's not actually an oppressive card on its own, thank goodness. Like, it's a 4/4 flyer, which is good on turn 2. It's very, very good. But it's not like necessarily auto win the game good, although it does do other things. But the point is, the spell costs 2 generic mana less to cast for each basic land type among the lands you control. So in Cartographia, it's not insane to play a Tundra, and then on turn 1, and then on turn 2, fetch up a Triome that's going to solve the rest of your colors or something. Well, I guess that's backwards because the Triome enters tapped. But
I'm picking up what you're putting down, though. Yeah. Absolutely.
You see where I'm going with this? 2 times, I'm proud of myself. 2 times I have played Scion of Draco on turn 2, and that feels very good.
And if it sticks, all your colored creatures, just get the benefit depending on that, which I imagine is really just sort of, icing on the cake. Ultimately, 2 mana 4/4 flyer is just, okay, well, what do you got? How's the game go from here? So put your opponent on a clock.
Right, and like that Cat Warrior, like there's a world in which he's even better, I suppose, if you're playing a 2 mana 5/3 and the opponent's having trouble answering it. It's got even another point of power. Anyway, yeah, that's a cool card. But you have to care about Zoo, because if that's not a deck in your environment, then obviously this is not a card for you.
Totally. Next one is Quirion Beastcaller. This is a creature Dryad Warrior for a generic and a green. It's a 2/2. And whenever you cast a creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Quirion Beastcaller. When Quirion Beastcaller dies, distribute X +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures you control, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters on Quirion Beastcaller. So this is a callback to Quirion Dryad that got bigger whenever you cast a white spell, a blue spell, a black spell, or a red spell. But this cares about creature spells, which is absolutely more in line with what green does. It plays creatures, and whenever you play a creature, it gets bigger. And there's a payoff if this dies in combat, it dies to removal. If you've got other creatures in play still, it's going to give those creatures a boon. And in an environment that cares about +1/+1 counters, this seems to be a worthy inclusion.
Yeah, super cool. I love it. It's a slam dunk in Petty Nobility. It's an awesome Arcbound Ravager, the like modular kind of thing, but for green and for things that aren't artifacts, right? Yeah, so it plays nicely with that whole suite of stuff, and like Ozolith and all these kinds of things where we can do cute things with counters and move them around.
All right, next up is Llanowar Green Widow. This is a creature spider that costs 2 generic and a green. It's a 4/3 with reach and trample. It also has domain for activated ability of 7 generic and a green. Yeah, this is a lot of text, bear with me. Return Llanowar Green Widow from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. It gains, if this permanent would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. This ability costs 1 generic less to activate for each basic land type among lands you control. 3 mana 4/3, reach and trample, pretty good value just right off the bat. I'm a fan of this. Kind of surprising for a spider because typically these are designed to be more defensive. Classic giant spiders at 2/4 with reach that costs 3 and a green. So I mean, in theory, you're thinking that creature's going to hang back, but this card is definitely built to smash, and it can also come back. And if you're tasting the rainbow, as I've been saying, this can cost less. And the activated ability, it costs 8 to activate, but assuming the floor is, it costs 7 total if you have forests. In your Cartographia, you're taking 5 mana off of that. So you're, in theory, could be putting this back into play for 2 and a green, if I'm doing my math correct, which is nothing to scoff at. And it can be done at instant speed too. So it's not going to be a surprise blocker because it does return to the field tapped, but you still have that opportunity to replay it. Yeah, just some good value in the right build.
Yeah, that's true. I can totally see that. And we were talking about how in Petty Nobility, I've got the sort of rule about 4 toughness flyers. So here's this spider with reach that has 4 power. That lines up pretty well. It is super annoying, though, at least to me personally, that you can't keep recurring the thing, right? It exiles after the first time you bring it back. That's weak. Free the spider. Let the spider come back.
Let it do spider things. All right, next one. This is a good one. This is Defiler of Vigor. This is a creature Phyrexian worm for 3 generic and 2 green. It's a 6/6 with trample, and as an additional cost to cast green permanent spells, you may pay 2 life. Those spells cost 1 green less to cast if you paid life this way. This effect reduces only the amount of green mana you pay. Whenever you cast a green permanent spell, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. This card is just gross because it just is. Just on rate, it's a 5 mana 6/6 with trample. So that's pretty tough to deal with. After that, whether you just pay your green creature spells on retail or you take advantage of paying the life to pay your creature spells, even a late game Llanowar Elf just makes your team bigger by +1/+1, permanently, and that includes the Defiler, itself. So it makes itself a 7/7. This seems like a very, very, very strong card, and it is almost unbeatable, at least in Dom Limited.
Yeah, I guess the only saving grace is that it costs 5, which isn't like totally insane, but it is a little bit up the curve. But that is, it's a powerful ability, getting to put counters on stuff anytime you cast stuff. I guess another pressure on the card and the power of that ability is the fact that it has to be a green spell you're casting and a green permanent. So there are some restrictions here, which is good. So I see that attenuating the power of the thing a little bit. Yeah, I can totally see what you say, that's gross. It seems like a better version of those host of cards we have that lets you put a counter on something when they enter the battlefield, like Renata, Caller of the Hunt or whatever, and Grumgully the Generous, and that Unicorn in Selesnya, all of those creatures that just say...
I like all those creatures, absolutely.
Yeah, right. This guy, isn't that. Instead, he's doing that kind of idea to your team whenever you're casting spells. So yeah, very good. I can see that being a sweet card. This was a cycle, as I recall, with this cost reduction in colored mana, giving foe Phyrexian mana to stuff. I don't remember what the whole cycle does, but I remember as I was kind of skimming, the green one looked like it was the best of the bunch by quite a bit.
It is, and I think probably the one that I thought was the weakest was actually the red Kavu. It was just 4 mana 4/4 that effectively pinged anything whenever you cast a red permanent spell, which is not terrible, but it's just kind of felt a little underwhelming, I guess. I mean, you could probably snipe a soldier token or just dome the opponent for 1, but just in comparison, it was just kind of not on the same rate as this card. Next one is, actually, this is the last green card. This is Herd Migration. This is a sorcery for 6 and a green, so this is pretty expensive. It has Domain, which reads, you create a 3/3 beast creature token for each basic land type among lands you control. It also has, for a generic and a green, discard Herd Migration, search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle, and you gain 3 life. If you're playing the Domain deck, or if you're playing with all the 5 land types, this is for 7 mana, you've got 15 power on the board. Barring any board wipes, this is going to be tough to deal with. Still pretty expensive. So this is, if you're playing this card for its face value, you're in for the long game. But it does have that side quest of, if you need to pitch it, or if for some reason the game life is going to keep you in the game, you get your basic land, you gain 3 life, and you kind of move on. I'm a fan of this card.
Yes, this was a card you won't be shocked to learn. I also put in Cartographia.
Heck yeah.
Heck yeah. Makes a lot of sense there. I didn't play with it a huge amount, but a little bit. And I did actually cast it in its primary mode. I sort of expected actually that, like we were talking about earlier with the cycling cards, I sort of expected it mainly to be cast, at least by me, in that second mode where you discard it and you tutor up a land. And maybe if I played with it more, that would happen more often. But I was often playing it, for 7 mana and putting 5 3/3s in play, and that's cool, and that's difficult to deal with. Although Cartographia, unlike Petty Nobility, does have sweepers, and so opponents can just clear the board on you. Anyway, I think it's a sweet card. I don't think it's like an auto-include in any environment, even in an environment that goes in hard for domain, like Cartographia does, because 7 is a lot. But I do love that it has that second mode, because otherwise the card would be garbage, I think, right?
Totally.
Basic land cycling. That works really well with my predilections too. Like in Petty Nobility, in the upper division of my green section, everything has cycling. Like Titanoth Rex, it costs 9 mana. That's dumb, but it's got cycling for 2. Crows and Tusker costs 7 mana, but you can cycle it for 3. Greater Sandworm costs 7 mana, you can cycle it for 2. Rampaging Hippo, you can cycle it. Greater Tanuki, you can cycle it.
Great cards.
Yeah.
Especially the Tusker.
Tusker is especially cool because you're not only cycling it, but you're also tutoring for the land. Similar card to this one that we're looking at. And I just love that flexibility so that if you have Tusker in your opening hand, you don't have to, that's not an auto mole if the rest of your hand looks kind of iffy, because, if you can at least get
it's a green divination.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very true. I'm with you. That makes this card.
All right, so we're going to go into the pseudo gold. We're going to start off with Phyrexian Missionary. This is a creature Phyrexian human cleric for a generic and a white. And it's a 2/3 with lifelink. It also has kicker for a generic and a black. When it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. In white, it's basically a slightly above rate lifelinker. It's a 2 mana 2/3 with lifelink, which is pretty sweet. Very simple. I like that. If you're in the white-black deck and you draw the slate, you get to basically cast a Gravedigger that has lifelink, and you get the best thing that's in your graveyard. Hopefully, be able to put it back into the battlefield. I think this is cute. I'm a fan of this card. I like playing this card too.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think this is a cute card. You have to either be in the life gain deck, A, or you have to be in Orzhov, B, right, to want to play this card. So maybe that makes it kind of narrow, because otherwise, in just some random white deck, you're not necessarily putting a 2 mana 2/3 with lifelink into the deck, right?
Totally.
But I like that it adds up to those things, and I like too that it's possible that you could not even exactly splash black, but imagine, if you will, that you're playing an Azorius deck. Maybe you care about life, right? You've got Phyrexian Missionary. You happen to pick up this Esper Triome as just some additional fixing, and that's fine, right? It's just, you're counting it as basically a 2-color mana fixing land, and you're totally fine with that. But it happens to give you access to black too. That's sweet. Then some percentage of the time, maybe you get to kick this thing thanks to your thing that you picked up. When you've played this card, have you been, or any of these cards with off-color kickers, have you ever played these cards in a deck where you don't have reliable access to the kicker, but you just have a small splash and hope to maybe sometimes you get there on the kicker?
Absolutely. And sometimes I've also played these cards without the splash, just because I think the rate was fine enough given the format that it's in. So keep in mind, I'm not talking about cube or even a very specific cube, but what I love the most about these spells, for the most part, and again, we'll get to this when we talk about Terra Sunder, is that a lot of these just are good on their own, and having access to the kicker is a nice to have, but not a need to have. So I've played Phyrexian Missionary just as a 2-mana 2/3 with lifelink, just being able to be essentially a grizzly bear, but strictly better just because it's a 2/3. Having the extra toughness is not irrelevant, and lifelink just kind of slowly, changes the game in my favor. But other spells like Tolarian Geyser, which I think is probably the best blue common in Dominaria United, I've just played that as just a 3-mana bounce a creature, draw a card, because it's just being able to replace itself and remove a threat is absolutely valuable. And I think I was on Twitter just kind of going back and forth of, do I wish I had kept the 3 I forget the name of it, but it's another 3-mana spell in red, but it dealt 4 to a creature or planeswalker. Had a white kicker to it. You could gain 4 life, so it's playing like an imitation of, Lightning Helix, so to speak, if you play the white. But a lot of these spells are just good on their own, but you can, but if you have the kicker, it's just nice. And that's what I really appreciate about the design in these, and that it's just a little bit, it's less narrow. There's a lot more flexibility to it. I think these next 2 we'll get into where it's monocolored cards, but these are gold cards. So like the Phyrexian Missionary, where I could see this in a mono white deck that doesn't need to have the black. This next card, I think, is a bit better with the kicker. It's a blue card. This is Rona's Vortex. It's an instant for a blue, and it has kicker of 2 generic and a black. And it reads, return target creature or planeswalker you don't control to its owner's hand. If the spell was kicked, put that permanent on the bottom of its owner's library instead. I think there's enough of a swath of 1-mana unsummon with a minor or even more than minor, I don't want to say major, upside, that I think this card could be anything else, and I wouldn't necessarily think it's a automatic include, but I do like Unsummon basically on principle. I like the different versions of Unsummon that we've seen in this one, just being able to pay the kicker and be able to just kind of put it in the bottom of the library and just definitely get rid of it and not see it for the rest of the game. Most likely is not something to be ignored, but this is definitely more of a blue-black spell than it is a blue spell.
I ran this in Cartographia. This was at the suggestion of Chill, MTG, whom we were talking about earlier.
Okay.
In our testing on MTGO, there's a whole lot of creature lands in the format, as you might well expect. And he was playing a blue control deck. It was like, I don't know, blue-white or something. And he had access to Wraths and so on. And he was like, but I just cannot interact with these lands, which is a virtue of the creature land, obviously. And this is why I love them so much, right? You wrath the board, you haven't dealt with the problem because the Celestial Colonnade or whatever it is coming back to hit you again. So he was like, how about if we help blue out a little bit by giving him access to unsummons? I thought that was a super sweet idea. Being able to put him on the bottom is nice for doing an even closer imitation of a Stone Rain, really. Like that land is just gone now. And if they don't have another land, they are actually down a land, All
right. And the last fake green card, I'm calling it, is Terra Sunder. This is an instant that costs a generic and a green, and it has a kicker cost of a generic and a black. This exiles target artifact or enchantment. If the spell was kicked, exile target non-land permanent instead. I think my favorite disenchant or naturalize effect has to be Wilt. And I noticed that you run Wilt in one of your cubes. And I like it because I don't really naturally, funny quotes, pun intended, really want to run these effects main deck, but Wilt gives you the option because you can literally just cycle it. You can just get rid of it if it's not going to be useful. And you can even take it out if you don't really see anything, game one where you think, all right, Wilt would be, really useful. That's kind of the hypothetical. And Terra Sunder, really, I look at this card and I really only want to play it if I'm able to splash the black, because I like the idea more of just at baseline, just getting rid of almost anything, just a non-land thing, just get rid of the strongest threat. But there's the possibility of, we'll call it reverse kicker where I do see that strong equipment or a saga that's going to give me trouble, and I just pay the 1 in a green to exile it instead. I mean, the exiling, just getting rid of it permanently is strong, but I'm not sure, what your thoughts on you like the spell, or you like this naturalize effect?
I do. I like it a lot. I'm with you. I love Wilt. That's such a good card. And I love cycling. I love drawing cards.
Yeah.
It's not to love about Wilt. Wilt isn't useful to you. You pitch it and you redraw. That's great. I also love naturalize effects that are tacked onto other things. Another one of my favorite cards of the past, however many years it's been, couple years, is Pest Infestation, which blow up 1,000 things, and it's scalable, and it could blow up nothing and still create a whole army of little insects for you. Pests, I mean. I like disenchants attached to other things. This thing, on the one hand, it's a more pure disenchant in its primary mode, where it's like literal disenchant. Although not quite. It's not quite fair because it exiles, as you quite rightly pointed out, and that can be big game. But then if you can get access to black mana at all, then all of a sudden you've turned it into, like an utter end or something, which is 2 white-black for an instant that destroys exiles an on-land permanent. And that's an extremely powerful effect. So all of a sudden, this thing, if you can put black mana into it, it can answer anything. It can answer planeswalkers, and in addition to obviously creatures and stuff. And in my environments, as well, I run an awful lot of mana fixing. I've got a strong belief in mana fixing. So I haven't played that much with this card, but I can totally see myself playing a deck that's not even like a rock deck necessarily, a green-black heavy deck, but it's a green deck and it like splashes a little bit of black in order to do who knows what, but among which enable this second mode in Tear Asunder, which I think is quite powerful. And I'm with you in pointing out the power of the exile too. That does actually make the card, even in its basic mode, substantially better than naturalize, because there's so many ways that especially artifact decks can get up to some welder nonsense and stuff. Exiling, very good, right? Let's keep that thing out of the yard.
Absolutely. All right, 3 more cards. We're now in the colorless section. This next one is Karn Silex. This is a legendary artifact that costs 3 generic. Karn Silex enters the battlefield tapped. Players can't pay life to cast spells or to activate abilities that aren't mana abilities. And for X, tap, exile Karn Silex, destroy each non-land permanent with mana value X or less, activate as a sorcery. So this is a version of Nevinyrral's Disc. It costs 1 less to cast, and it still comes into play with Summoning Sickness. But it blows up a lot of stuff. However, I'm not sure how in vogue this is, and I think I'm probably now reminiscing on an episode of like the Ubercube podcast, and I think it was with their interview with Justin Parnell about should powder keg and ratchet bomb still be in cubes, or how playable they are. So I think they're a little bit cool on this kind of design, but this is still a colorless effect that blows up a lot of stuff, and I think is a fine kill switch for when you need to use it, or at the very least, if it's on the field, your opponent gets to play around it. But in your cubes, I think as far as that static ability goes, really the only spell that seems to be impacted would be Dismember.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's an extremely short list and often not going to be relevant. That's true. This is cute that we're getting a colorless version of Pernicious Deed, I guess, effectively. Something close to that. Activate only as a sorcery. That's kind of interesting. Gives you a timing restriction that makes it a little worse than it might otherwise be. I think for me, in my particular environments, we've got such deep access to wraths across so many aspects of the color pie now that this doesn't seem as useful as it might have been at another moment in time. Although granted, this does hit enchantments and artifacts and planeswalkers and whatever, so that's big game, and that's very different from like actual Wrath of God. And maybe it makes it a little closer to something like Oblivion Stone or something. Probably going to have it find its happiest home in something like our friend Dan Schneider's Devoid Cube. I haven't seen what changes he's made, but I imagine he's gobbling up stuff like Karn's Silex sounds super great.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, this set has been out for a while, so I'm sure he's caught on to that. And I'm sure right now he is devouring the Brothers War with all the different artifacts that are in that. I mean, that is a set that is built for him,
Oh yeah,
100%.
yeah, for sure. It's his own custom bespoke magic set coming out.
All right, Golden Argosy is a 4 mana legendary artifact vehicle with a pseudo base power toughness 3/6. Whenever Golden Argosy attacks, exile each creature that crewed it this turn, return them to the battlefield tapped under their owner's control at the beginning of the next end step, and it has crew 1. This seems like a good use of Blink, being able to not just crew with the one creature that has 1 power, but you can crew with a total power of 1 or more. So you can crew with, the Resolute Reinforcement plus a Thraben Inspector plus Argivian Cavalier plus really anything else. If you magically had those 3 in play and plus some other stuff, you just swing with the Argosy, they come back the next end step and all their ETBs trigger and you're living happy fun times.
That's cool. That is another good addition to the Blink archetype because we're so much better on the one hand in supporting Blink these days. Obviously, Soul Herder was a huge include, a huge add, and that's not so that's great. And we've gotten 1 or 2 shot effects like Ephemerate. So and then Braga is the classic, Braga King Eternal, and I guess there have been other classic ones like there's that Venser that I'm not running here because I don't have any Planeswalkers and Petty Nobility. So yeah, it's super cool to get another version of this because otherwise I'm going kind of deep on stuff like Conjurer's Closet, to try to find other ways of blinking stuff or Teleportation Circle in white. So I like that. Also, this is neither here nor there, but I appreciate that we've got this allusion to Jason and the Argonauts with the Golden Argosy. So
it is a great illustration for sure. And I also like that this as a layer where combat becomes relevant. I do like Conjurer's Closet as sort of a static trick where it's just literally just an end step trigger and you can do some shenanigans with it beyond the blink. Like if you somehow control magic or somehow gain control of an opponent's creature with the closet, you can blink it comes back into play under your control and it stays under your control. So it's like you've got your sower, you sower their guy, you conjure a closet that creature, it stays into play. So even if they kill the sower, it's done. So I mean there's that shenanigans there. But I like that you can't just crew this and then just get the value or not immediately, but at the end step, just kind of doing simple. No, the Argosy does have to attack. It doesn't have any special evasion. It does have 6 toughness, so it's going to be tough to kill in combat. So it's got a big defense, but it still adds a layer to it where there's an extra step to being able to crew it, to make it a creature, and to get the payoff. That you have to kind of engage with your opponent in a way and kind of work around that. I think that layer is good gameplay.
That's an excellent point that I hadn't really considered, that forcing you to get into combat makes game states that could otherwise be these games of solitaire where you can just like sit there blinking your stuff and trying to ignore the opponent insofar as possible, right? And just play your little game. And there's some just inherent value in things that are inviting you to both combo, but also get into the red zone. I like it.
All right. And our last card is Joda's Codex, which I'm kind of surprised given the first 2 artifacts were both legendary. This is a non-legendary artifact that costs 5 generic, and it has domain, activated ability of 5 generic tap, draw a card. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each basic land type among lands you control. If you're playing the domain deck, you've got your Triome and your Shock in play. You're essentially just tapping this to draw a card. This is 1 mana more than a Coercive Portal, but on the other hand, you don't have to go through the rigmarole of, we get to cast votes. What are we doing this turn? And maybe you draw a card. This is just no. If you're playing the lands that you need, you're tasting like all the colors of that palette, then you are just tap, draw a card. You're drawing 2 cards a turn. I think this card is great.
Here's an aside about Coercive Portal. Coercive Portal has just been such a part of my cube life for so long now, it feels like, that I just thought that sort of everybody was on board with Coercive Portal. And not necessarily on board in the sense of running it, but like we all know what the darn card does.
Right.
Well, at CubeCon, I realized the error of my ways, because I saw there were a number of times where I was kind of wandering around as I could and watching what people were getting up to with my cubes, I wanted to see what people are doing. And I saw there were a few instances where I saw people with Coercive Portal who are having this whole discussion at the game table, right? Where like somebody would be like, so what choice do I make so that you don't get to draw a card? And the other person will be like,
Right.
there is no choice. The card says I draw a card, right? Like shortcut it in that way. Anyway, Coercive Portal, it turns out, isn't as broadly recognized as I thought it was, and it caused some amount of confusion. This thing, yeah, it costs more. It's possible it costs 0 to draw a card, but also it's very possible that it just doesn't.
Sure.
And, I'm a proponent of running Conqueror's Galleon pre-flipped as Conqueror's Foothold. Love that. Got a video on that. It's sort of a similar idea, except it's a land, so you don't actually have to cast it, and you don't pay anything. And then it's got all these different modes available to you. You can loot, or you can draw, or you can regrow. Anyway, I guess what I'm getting at is that Joda's Codex, I can see the value of Domain making all of this stuff cheaper, but it still costs 5 to cast. And then
yes,
it still costs like something to draw a card, unless it doesn't in very particular circumstances. I don't know. I'm kind of suspicious of this. This looks expensive to me, and it looks like an enormous mana investment. I mean, even the initial 5 in the hope of drawing a card is kind of a lot,
Absolutely fair. Absolutely. I think, it's a non-zero chance that this is basically not better nor worse, kind of like a pseudo equivalent to JM Day Tome, really, which is, absolutely outclassed at this point in Magic's history. But still, I think it's got potential. I do agree, like, the difference between 4 or 5 is also not insignificant either.
Yeah. No, but I see what you're getting at. If you're supporting Domain, if you're supporting artifacts, if you're in like a Golos deck or something, like this seems like it slots right into that kind of deck, right? But also this kind of a package that a Joda's Codex offers is almost definitionally like what every Planeswalker offers you as well, plus some more stuff, right? Like you're going to spend 5 mana and get a Planeswalker, and then you're going to do some stuff that's going to buy you a card every turn or do something else, or, provide you still more value in some way. But that's not going to be colorless. So there's that too as well, I guess, right? This is a colorless card.
A lot of back and forth for sure, but absolutely fair. And that's all I got, man.
I'm putting you on the spot, but hit me with your favorite card, or your like 2 favorite cards. What are you most excited about from the set?
Well, this is kind of cheating, but one card that I was really excited to see was, this is a reprint, was Impulse. I liked seeing that card reprint. I think that's probably my favorite blue spell that replaces itself. I like the design of it in that it's 2 mana. You look at the top 4 and take the best one and put the rest on the bottom. It is, I just have always really liked that. And I'm not just saying that, it's like, it came from Visions, it's my favorite block from Magic's history. But, just seeing that card, being able to draft it, and also just create some great value in the blue decks that I had, being able to play my Tolarian Terrors for 1 mana less after it, it's resolved some turns ago, or trigger my prowess or prowess-like triggers, and so on. From a design point, it's just, it is a solid, balanced card that does work, and I think was probably a little underestimated, initially, but in the field that I was in, it was really great, and it did what you needed to do, and it really shone in the format. As far as new cards that were printed. I actually do really like the Night of Dawn's Light. It's a nice throwback. So the Night of Dawn's Light and its black mirrored pair, the Night of Dust Shadow, this sort of one lets you gain one more life, the other one says your opponents can't gain life, but they're both pump knights where with different also static abilities of one has menace, the other has first strike. I like it as a, these are good creatures on rate. It's a nice throwback to the Order of Leap Beer and the Order of the Ebon Hand from Fallen Empires. They didn't just print a new version of White Knight, new version of Black Knight. Another card would probably be the Aether Channeler. I like a Mana War kind of effect, but this is a creature that has a lot of versatility. When it hits the field, it does what you need it to do at the time it comes in. Nothing too exciting, and I do think that for overall, I think the set is not necessarily a high-powered set in terms of like a broken rare, something that's just very egregious on rate. These are just all cards that have strength in themselves.
I guess I'll throw in my favorite from the set just because why not? Well, I guess I'll say the runner-up is the Jaya, Fiery Negotiator, with whom I have not played, but I'm very excited to try her out. I feel like she's not Chandra Torch of Defiance, but still very good. And then the other card is a card that I have played with. So my number one, I suppose, is that Sarah Paragon that you compared to Luris. That's a very sweet card who does an awful lot of stuff. Luris is an awesome comparison. She's also maybe in a way like a very small Sun Titan or something. So smaller, but also, has evasion. So that's cool. And she does get to do the thing every turn. Anyway, that's a very cool card that I've already had a great deal of fun playing with, and I anticipate having a lot more fun playing with. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Stephen. This has been an awesome tour through Dominaria United. Super helpful. I'm ready to I'm ready to hit it. I'm ready to go to Elaeus and Petty Nobility and start sorting things out, cutting things viciously and putting new cards in. Thank you so much, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you, John.